This is a point I really like to hammer home. So many people feel stuck because they say they don't have a choice. We all do. The choices might not be a good one, but there is a choice there. People want the choice. And I think having that freedom of choice, they're going to choose that over something else. And it's even been shown people are willing to take a 20% pay cut to have more freedom. Happier people are more productive. And I think that's got a massive amount to do with this.
Welcome to the Learn It All podcast, the show for today's leaders who want to get ahead and stay ahead, because we believe great leaders aren't born or made, they are always in the making. I'm your host, Damon Lembi, two-time best-selling author and CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has helped upskill over 2 million people over the past 3 decades. My guest today is Michelle Coulson. She's the founder of Remote Rebellion. In today's episode, we're going to get real about remote work, the myths, the challenges, and why remote work doesn't always mean what you think it does. In our conversation today, Michelle and I are going to touch on how to decide if remote work is really for you, the traits that set apart top remote workers, why communication roles make or break remote teams, and how to actually stand out in a super competitive remote job market. So, Michelle, you help people build their work around life instead of the other way around, right? Can you share a little bit about your philosophy on that?
Yeah, and it's essentially, I think, especially in North America, I work with a lot of North Americans, a lot of Europeans and people around the world as well. We have been conditioned to thinking that work should be our life and we should fit in our social life, our family life around that job. And I don't believe that's the way that it should be. I think work is a means to living your life. And you can enjoy what you do, you can be passionate about what you do, but I really think in a lot of Western cultures, we've got it the wrong way round. And we are so focused on work and life, and family comes second, fitness, nutrition, all of this comes after the job, and we're leaving people burnt out. So I think it should be the other way around.
You've been doing this for a while, I think, even going back to 2016, 2017, but it really all came about, Remote Rebellion came about because of the pandemic. Do you think you would have started this if it wasn't for the pandemic?
I was going in that direction, but I think it would have been a lot slower. So I introduced a remote work policy at the company I was working at as a recruiter in 2017. So, and that was hybrid. I managed to get 4 days a week remote, and we had to go to the office on Fridays. So I was going in that direction really slowly. Would I have become a remote work coach and built and started my business? I honestly don't know. I think I'd like to say yes, but I think it would have maybe come 5 years later.
And I mean, for my own experience, we've, Learn It's been around for 30 years and we're always an in-person company. But the pandemic pushed us into a remote first, not only a working environment, but our product delivery, when it comes to delivering soft skilled classes, and now about 85% of what we do is virtual versus in-person learning. So it's been a big shift, but for the better for the most part.
That's
And
awesome.
you're not necessarily anti-office, right? I mean, you're just more of anti bringing people into the office for the wrong reason.
Exactly. I say I'm pro-choice in all walks of life, and that is like, some people work better in an office. Some people want to get away from their kids and go to the office like a couple of days, and we can have a bit of a rest or whatever. Or they enjoy going to that place of work and they work in a better environment in the office. So I'm really not anti-office. In fact, the office that I quit to start Remote Rebellion, I loved that office. Like, I was an internal recruiter, so I got to choose who I worked with. So I obviously loved the people I worked with. The office environment was great. It was a great company culture. We did Nerf gun wars in the office like kids. Like, it was a good office environment. But I also prefer having the choice of waking up and having an extra 2 hours to my day and getting to choose where I work from. If I feel like, if it's, time of the month and I just want to work from my bed, I'll do that day. Or if I actually feel like going to a co-working. So I'm all pro-choice rather than it's all about remote and not about the office.
What do you think is a example of pushing people back to the office for the wrong reason?
That they have to pay their office. They've already done the 7-year lease or something. So, well, we paid for it. We may as well get people back in. Ridiculous reason. Second one, we don't trust people. We think they're slacking off. We don't think they're doing the right work. stupid reason. Don't hire people you don't trust. Get rid of them if they're not good at what they do. Like if you don't trust them, why have them working there? It's like a relationship. If you don't trust the person you're with, there's not that much hope really. So you've got other issues, not just like, okay, I don't trust my partner, I must never let them go out in case they meet another guy or another girl. That would be ridiculous, right? Like, so I feel like the wrong issues are looked at, and these are some of them of like we must be able to see people, otherwise we don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. And what I found a lot of times in the people I just kind of mentor or coach is their frustration is coming into the office to do the same work that they do remotely. So how, from a employer's perspective, how could you help them identify tasks and responsibilities that maybe people don't need to come in for, and helping to get more intentional in bringing them in only when they need to do specific things that make sense?
I think it should be the other way round, rather than like, what are the things that they can be remote for? Think about, okay, what are the things that you really feel are important to do in person? Let's list all of those and go of the classic why method. Okay, so you think team building. Okay, cool. Why are we doing team building? Because X, Y, Z. Why are we doing that? Why do you think you need to be in person? And it might be that you get through the whys and be like, actually, it is better to do that in person. Cool. But keep asking yourself these why questions of, there's a trade-off, right? Like, I've realized having a completely remote team that are based in 3 different continents, 3 different time zones, I've realized there are trade-offs, and I love it when I've been able to get face-to-face in person with my team. But the trade-off for demanding that they come to one specific location in the whole of the world means you don't get access to however many billion people in the world. Instead, you get access to tens of thousands in that city or in that location. So for me, having that trade-off of people who feel free, who I get to pick out of a whole world of people and choose the best talent, that to me is worth the trade-off of like, okay, maybe I would like a bit more in-person time. Ideally, I would want once a month, for example, once a week, however people prefer it. But there's always a trade-off. There's no perfect and ideal for each.
No, there isn't any ideal for, I mean, there's always different types of scenarios, and you got to figure out what works. As far as your own experience, what has been the biggest challenge running a remote first company or remote only company?
I think assuming, especially at the beginning, assuming that people just knew how to do it and that it was simple. So as someone who is managing a team, I'm like, well, it's simple. You do X, Y, Z, and they just do it remotely. But some people are simply not self-sufficient enough. They almost can't compute, because we've been brainwashed a lot of the time of like, okay, 9 to 5, you get given this task, you report in, you work 8 hours, you do this. So when you're like, oh, we don't have set hours, they're like, what? Like, so when do I work? How many hours do I work? I'm like, well, you get the job done. And they're like, but how many hours should I do? And they get bogged down by this restrictions that they're so used to, that we've all been sort of programmed into us that we're supposed to do, that some people freak out with that level of flexibility, and some people actually can't manage themselves, and myself included. Actually, I was like, oh, I just want to be free and I want to be flexible. And I realized how much of like that was almost an imprisonment in its way, because I'm like, I can have all this flexibility, I can work whenever the hell I want. But now I'm constantly calendar moving, because I'm like, okay, I want to go to the water park on that Wednesday. So that means I'll need to do this work on the Sunday, and I need to do this here, and and then I'm managing my diary constantly. So sometimes having a bit of structure, I've realized, is important. Just because you can work when and wherever you want doesn't mean you have to. And I think I've realized that. It took me a couple of years to realize that.
And also what I hear you saying is that when it comes to the actual work, just because you're working, what you're doing with the tasks and everything you're doing now, say in person, if you're going remote, it's not really the exact same thing, right? And you need a different set of traits, really. What are the top traits that you believe people need to be a super successful remote worker?
Communication. And when I say communication, asynchronous communication. Whilst not all remote first companies are asynchronous, I do feel like that's such an important thing to be able to document. You can't just tap someone on the shoulder and ask any of I used to work in a software development house when I was in person. And I was the worst for tapping the developers on the shoulder when they're mid-code, being like, hey, can I just ask you a question? Like they always said they got more work done when I wasn't in the office, which is ironic, actually. So I realized I had to unlearn that thing. You can't just tap someone on the shoulder just because you want an answer right now. You're disturbing their flow. So you need to be able to communicate your questions clearly and jump a few step ahead of like, okay, have I made this clear? Am I going to put this out and Damon's going to come back and say, what do you mean by this? Where can I find that? Where can I do that? And you're in a different time zone. I'm already in bed by the time you get the message and you've got to wait till I wake up. So preempting the steps of, how can I make this easy for him so he has everything he needs so he can respond rather than having to come back with the questions? So you've got to rethink the way that you communicate in that way. And also the communication style that you have in working cross-culturally. The way that I speak when I'm speaking to you now is complete. I've actually been told this from friends that I heard two of them having a conversation about me and I was like listening in. And I heard one of them say, she's two different people. She's really nice and friendly when you get her on the phone, but she's like a bitch when she's on messages. So like my style when I'm sorry for the language, but my
No,
style
you could
when
say
I'm
bitch, but
okay,
yeah.
good. My style when I'm messaging, I'm really blunt. I'm no hi, how are you, smiley faces. I'm like, do this, Damon. And people are like, whoa, like have I done something wrong? So I think communicating to people, if that's a different style and you have two different personalities written and on a call, let people know so they don't think they've done something wrong, and try and communicate that to them of your preferred method of communication. You might never get a response from someone on Slack, but send them an email and they'll respond straight away. So getting clear on how people communicate differently and how different cultures communicate differently. You speak to someone who's Dutch and they'll be completely direct and say, I don't like your face. You speak to someone in India and they will tell you yes, 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 and they actually don't know the answer to something. So understand the different nuances of how cultures communicate, and understanding that just because they're not communicating in the way that you're used to and the way that you like, it doesn't mean that they're wrong. So understanding that a bit better.
I come across that all the time, and I think I do the same thing where I'll come across much differently over email or text than you do verbally, and I think that's something you need to be self-aware of, and that you need to kind of help coach your team and whoever you're working with to understand that, and it's so important. And a lot of times people should just pick up the phone and maybe even call somebody, or on Zoom, because it can sit with them for a while. Like, oh man, Damon's super upset with me, in a different situation, and I know you're in Manchester right now. A good friend of mine who's getting married in London, who worked with me for a long time, when she started running a global team, she said the same thing. The people in Italy versus France or South America, culturally, they were just so much different, and figuring out how to adapt to their communication style was very difficult. And I know you put together communication rules as well, right? Can you share a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I've forgotten that I'd put that out there. So the communication rules of like how, for me, it's really important of being efficient. I don't see the point in me sending you a message saying on Slack, for example, hey Damon, can you do XYZ for me, please? By you responding saying, yep, no problem, that's an extra notification. I don't need that extra notification. Just a simple emoji responding to that message with a thumbs up or a tick to say you've done can save all of this back and forth needed. And equally, I say to the communication rule about, I don't need a thank you. I don't need I'm on it. I will assume if I've sent that message, you're on this. I don't need a thank you. Other people might need a thank you, might need an emoji. So it's about, again, communicating those rules to other people of, this is where we communicate about this. Notion is where we have all of our information, all of our projects. Slack is for quick questions. WhatsApp is for emergencies. And having those rules for people so that they don't feel like they have to have their Slack on their phone or their emails on their phone even. And I make that clear with my team as well, of like, hey, you don't need to have any work stuff on your phone. If I need something for an emergency, I've got your personal WhatsApp, and if you're open, I'll send you a message. But we're not saving lives here. No one's going to die if you don't respond to a message in 48 hours. So I say to my team, work where you want, when you want. If you're not going to be contactable for 24, 48 hours, just let us know. Put a message in Slack so we know where you are. So these communication rules for me are quite important. So people, when they start, they can say, okay, this is where I go to for this. This is acceptable to just do a thumbs up, right? Like some people might think that's rude, especially the different the different age groups. 20-odd-year-olds will communicate way differently online than 50-odd-year-olds. So understanding that those nuances of all of these fluffy emojis and stuff is part of one person's communication. Where I'm like, I don't need all of that fluff. Like it's different for everyone.
And I think it's so important because I think sometimes we get in the habit of just sending whatever communication in whatever channel we're on at the time. Sometimes it's in Teams, and sometimes it's in text, and then it's an email, and it really gets confusing and frustrating for individuals. So setting those boundaries or those guidelines up front is super important.
I just want to say, I want to actually add to that, that I am not perfect. And I've been pulled up from my team of them saying, hey, you told us WhatsApp isn't work, and you've just sent me some WhatsApp messages asking me for this. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, and I think that's an important thing to note of, like calling people out, like being candid with each other, be like, you said this. Just because you're the founder of the company doesn't mean that you get to go against the rules. These rules are here for a place, are here for a reason. And I'm like, yeah, fair point. That's just something to add. I make the mistakes and I break the rules sometimes.
Well, there's a couple things there. Number one, you're humble enough to admit that you make mistakes. And two, it shows that you're a great leader because they have the psychological safety to be able to call you out. That they feel like they work in an organization where they can be clear and direct with their leaders. And I feel like that at my organization too, where people say, hey, Damon, you know what? You say this, but you've done this. I mean, none of us are perfect. And we need our team to help keep us accountable.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is important. That's one of the things when I'm interviewing people is I make clear. I actually say, hey, these are the things I do and I'm really annoying for. These are the downsides of working for me, with me. I do this, I do that, I do this. Like I'm working on it, I'm trying, but just to let you know, is that okay? Because otherwise it's not going to be the right place for you.
Yeah. Now, how about let's say, for instance, that I'm somebody in my 40s or 50s. I've always been in office, but for one reason or another, I want to go remote. Maybe I have to. I got to take care of a sick parent or whatever. How would you help somebody in that situation get started and take the first step?
Yeah, I'll admit it is tougher for someone later on in life who hasn't worked remotely before to make the leap into working remotely. I would do a lot of questioning before, and I would ask, like, why is it that remote is important? And if it is, hey, I'm looking after a sick parent or caring after someone, asking questions about how they feel working remotely will be different, because the loneliness factor comes up, and some people are like, oh, working remote is lonely, I like going to the office, I like meeting people. So I'd want to dispel some of those things. And I honestly think that's a cop out. It's a massive excuse as to why people say that they don't want to work remotely, because I'm more sociable now and I have more social interactions than I ever did working in an office. No, not more, but more meaningful, if it were, because I get to choose the people I'm having those interactions with, and I get to hang out with my loved ones more, not necessarily colleagues. So I would ask the questions around, how do you think it would feel? Where would you work from? Would you be in your home office? Like, would you work from co-working? Have you looked into this? The difference is I don't help people decide whether they want to go remote. I'm here for when people are like, remote is the only way that I want to go, or is it my main priority? Help me get there. So I'm not here to convince people you should go remote. Like, there's enough people wanting remote jobs that I don't need to convince any more people that they want it. But I would help them understand the realities of how much more competitive it is to get a remote role. So just manage their expectations. The 7 to 9 times harder to get a remote role than it is to get something on site. Manage their expectations there. And once like I said, I don't typically convince people that they want to do that. So I don't go into detail about these are the differences of it. But if I were to say that, giving them the pros and the cons, just to say, these are the downsides of it. Sometimes it is frustrating if you're in different time zones and you can't get hold of someone right away, and you can't just pick up the phone because they're asleep. So I would give the good, the bad, and the ugly about remote working, and then see if it's still something they wanted to do. Because you say they don't have a choice. In most of us in the Western world, we do have a choice. There's a choice in pretty much everything we do. So, this is a point I really like to hammer home. So many people feel stuck because they say they don't have a choice. We all do. The choices might not be a good one, but there is a choice there.
Okay, so you said it's 7 to 9 times harder to get a remote job. Is that because the amount of remote jobs are decreasing because people are being pushed back into the office? Is it a combination of that and more people wanting a remote work?
Exactly. It's a combination. So it's been fairly static over the last year, but from 2021 to 2024, it was gradually the number of roles were decreasing, yet the demand was still there. So LinkedIn did a study and they showed that 8% of jobs on LinkedIn were considered remote. And that's including the ones that say they're remote, but they're actually not when people get into it. And 43% or more than 43% of all applications were going to that 8%. So that just shows you the kind of supply and demand. People's demand for remote roles are still there, but there's still not enough of bridging that gap. I do feel like that will change, and it will change out of necessity as soon as the market picks up and people quit in droves because they've got more options. And we saw it in 2021, the Great Resignation. That's going to happen again. As soon as the market picks up again, the companies won't have as much power and they won't be able to say, well, what are you going to do? You either come hybrid or you work in the office or you go and get another job. So that will change.
What I hear you saying is that maybe employers are holding their people captive now because they have the leverage. But when things turn around, which they always do turn around, those people are going to leave in droves because they're going to remember how they're treated now and they're going to want to go find a place that's more accommodating and they feel like more like they belong.
Yeah. And not even if they're treated well, people think like they vote with their feet. People want choice. Like, even if they don't want to be fully remote, they want the option. Oh, we've got the boiler, the guy fixing the boiler coming round, and maybe I don't want to take a half day off work, or I want to pick my kids up from school, or I want to actually not spend 2 hours a day commuting because maybe I didn't feel well today. Or people want the choice, and I think having that freedom of choice, they're going to choose that over something else. And it's even been shown people are willing to take a 20% pay cut to have more freedom.
And have there been a lot of studies that have shown that remote work is actually much more efficient and productive than in person, or are there just different reports that show it both ways?
Show it both ways, and it really depends. It depends on the person. Some people are not set up for remote work, either physically or mentally. Some people just aren't self-starters and aren't able to manage their own time or their diaries effectively and need that little nudge on the shoulder. So not everyone is suited to remote work. Some people need that buzz of the office. They need their boss on their shoulders. Some people actually need that. So some people are productive or more productive, others not so. Generally speaking, from the studies I've seen, it's far higher weighted in terms of being more productive. And that's linked to happiness. If people have 2 hours extra a day in their life, they are spending time with their kids. They're not having parent guilt. I hear a lot about mum guilt amongst my friends. That guilt of like, oh God, I didn't even see my kid today. I didn't even read them a bedtime story. I didn't do this. I missed their recital. Or if they're able to exercise and they're able to not like, I'm a snack fiend, a chocolate fiend, and I have no self-control. When I was in the office, I would walk past the snack table. I would stuff my face with biscuits. I don't buy that stuff at home. So little things like that about the sugar intake, the choosing who you surround yourself with, in the environment you surround yourself with, how you have the lighting. Like me, for me, I love a sea view. I usually have a really nice sea view. That all affects happiness, and happier people are more productive. And I think that's got a massive amount to do with this.
So in this crowded space out there for finding remote jobs, how do you and your organization help people kind of stand out for these positions?
It's a mixture of learning how to sell and market yourself, how to use your personal brand to figure out what that personal brand is for you. People seem to think that you just need that if you're self-employed or if you're a freelancer, but personal branding plays a big part in this. So understanding what yours looks like before we even get to that, doing the analysis of what do I want? So many people go into it and it's like the equivalent of building a house without getting an architect in to know exactly what that house looks like. And the window needs to be this size or the doors need to be made of this material, like really getting granular on what ideal looks like for you. Because if you don't know and you're going in just kind of spraying and praying, you don't have much hope really, because someone else is going to be like, this guy doesn't even know what he wants. So getting clear on that first. Showing how to sell and market themselves on paper is really difficult because people are just a name on a screen. So showing them how to stand out, and I have a really big network that I connect people with as well. So you go from being name on screen to, oh, that's Damon, that's the guy who was on that podcast that time. You should speak to him. He's great. And as you and I who've both hired over the years, how many people have you hired that has been an introduction or a referral, and maybe on paper you wouldn't have taken a second glance at them?
Without a doubt. I mean, one of the things that I feel really fortunate about over the years, so many of our the people that we've hired have come through, especially the Learn It network, the people who used to work at Learn It, or even our customers who are familiar with our values and myself as a leader. And by the time they get to us, they know that they could be a good fit for our organization. I think that that is really, really key. The other thing you said that I think it's really key is that people need to be intentional about their personal brand. I mean, you ha- you don't have to be a leader; you have to have a personal brand these days. I think it's non-negotiable.
Yeah, it is. And like you said about the referral piece, people think, oh, I need to network, but many people don't know how to network effectively, and they go in asking for something straight away, and they either come across as desperate, they come across as greedy, or just or it's hard to find that balance. And people go in and they're like, oh, they send a few messages on LinkedIn and connect with people. They're like, oh, I sent a message and no one responded, and they're like, that doesn't work, I'll just throw that away, rather than thinking about, okay, how can I utilize the network I have? And how can I work with other people to intentionally network and intentionally go in with the attitude of what can I give and what can I offer to people, rather than like, give me a job, give me a job. So it's doing it a lot more intentionally. The introductions, not what you know, who you know. I'm really showing from a recruiter's perspective, because I was a recruiter for 7 years before starting Remote Rebellion. I give a really raw, unfiltered review of, okay, let me have a look at your resume. Here's the job. I'm going to pretend right now I'm first day on the job in recruitment. I'm not very bright. I've just got your CV through for this job. And I dumb it down. If you came in and you applied to a COO role and you had a job title as strategic director of ops, and I'm like, oh, no, this job is CEO, COO. He doesn't have this experience. No, really dumbing it down and saying, this is how I'm scanning your resume in 6 seconds. I don't have time. I've got 500 applications. I'm not going to try and search for whether you're suitable or not. If you don't tell me in this first fold of the screen how you're relevant, you're gone. I'm swiping left. So people don't realize how brutal it is of like, no, can't see it in a few seconds. Okay, gone. I'm going on to the next. It's people also seem to think that they're trying to beat the ATS. If I see that one more time of like beat the ATS bots, 9 times out of 10, it's a human looking at your resume. People don't want to believe it, but it's true.
But you do have, I heard you say that you do have a little hack that you use to make sure that when people are putting out resumes, that they've actually taken a look at the job before, right?
Yes.
Let me just give you an example. I posted a job on LinkedIn, a remote first job. I got 2,000 resumes, 2,000 resumes. And when we started interviewing people, the vast majority of them, Michelle, they never even looked at the job coming into it. I mean, so how do we help? I guess let me reframe my question. How do we help hiring managers kind of sift through even serious candidates?
There's a filter process. So when I had the same issue, I didn't have thousands. So you must be doing something right if you had a few thousand apply. That's really good. But one of the ways that I set up my process when I'm hiring for my team is I have an easy filter process. So I, rather than having to look at 2,000 or something, I will have knockout questions. So I don't have an ATS. I have a simple Google form and put them into sheets and then filter there. So let's say I have 500 people. And one of the questions is, how many years experience do you have in digital marketing, for example? And anyone who doesn't check the boxes that I'm looking for, then they're dismissed. But I also have a sneaky attention to detail question, which I know some people, there's mixed reviews on this one, but something like, what is the secret code? And in the job
That's what I was referring
description,
to, by the way. That's what
oh,
that's
okay.
that's what I was trying to say, but I messed it up.
That's okay. Yeah, what is the secret code? So the secret code is 28, and it's in the requirements. The requirements of this role to apply are X years of experience, this, tick, tick, tick. And the secret code is 28. You'll need this to apply. So it's not hidden in small writing. It's up there in the requirements. And I got the stats somewhere, but there was at least 30% of people did not put that in the response. So already you've got 30% of people dismissed, and that makes it a lot easier, I guarantee. And some people, like you said, they just don't read the job description. So people get put off when they see hundreds and even thousands that have applied to the role. They don't know that maybe 50% of them are rubbish. And the other 20% just already got a job and they didn't interview. So you should always put your hat in the ring, especially if you feel like you're a good match for that role. But you need to find a way to stand out as well as actually bothering to read the job ad.
Yeah, you need to find a way to stand out. And another point I've heard you make that I really agree with too is just don't mass apply, because getting a bunch of no's anyways kind of demotivates you a little bit.
And you're also, think about it from a selfless perspective. The more rubbish or like things you throw at the wall and it's not suitable at all, if 100 people do that, which they are doing, that might stop someone really good to even get their CV looked at because they close the role. So people get dismissed. So you're perpetuating the problem. You're being part of the problem as to why, not that it's okay, but why recruiters are not getting back to candidates, because they're inundated with irrelevant profiles. So you're part of the problem that you're having all this pain for, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And the problem's coming from both angles. You get people just flooding it with you know, applying for jobs, and then you get the employers on the other angle looking at it and, you know, just dismissing a bunch. I mean, so it's just compounded from both sides. One thing I like to point out, and I know that you're in agreement with this, is a lot of times if you're going to apply for a job, whether it's remote or even in person, and even if you don't meet all the stupid qualifications like a degree or 5 years experience, my thing is if you really want it, just go for it. Just go for it and see what happens, because too many people miss out on jobs because they feel like that those requirements are mandatory. And I think for leaders as well, they need to get relax more on those when it comes down to it.
Yes and no. I partially agree with you on that, but I
Okay.
do think if it is a work from anywhere role, so you've got remote first, fully remote, and work from anywhere. So the work from anywhere, even rarer, like the golden ticket. Knowing how competitive those roles are, I would argue it's not the best use of time, especially if it's a long application form, to apply for those roles unless you hit at least kind of 85% of the requirements. And usually I'd say about 70% and then go for it. But knowing how competitive they are, it's all about not having infinite amount of hours in your day and knowing which is the best use of your time. So whilst I think, yeah, if you've got unlimited hours and you can apply for it, go for it. But people have to, it's just like a budget of money. You don't have buckets of money lying around. You need to decide where you're going to spend your money correctly. And it's a little bit like that. So I wouldn't dismiss people from doing it, but I'd say, okay, is it worth the time investment? If it's going to take you an hour to apply for this role and they're asking for these requirements in the top 2 bullet points and you don't have them, what is the likelihood of getting this? So I say, yes, shoot for the stars, but also manage your expectations as well and the realities of it.
No, that makes sense. I mean, essentially what you're saying is you don't have unlimited time, and you need to be a little bit realistic with yourself as well.
Exactly.
What do you think about, let's say I'm relatively new to the workforce, and eventually I aspire to be a leader. Do you think somebody who comes in and they work remotely, and they don't get any in-person experience, do you think that they can evolve eventually into a great leader, leading teams both in person and remotely, or do you think you need some in-person experience?
That's a really good question, and I've completely changed my stance on this actually. In the early days, I was adamant. I was like, "No, you can do everything remotely. You don't need to have done in person." And I've changed my mind a little bit on that. I feel like there is a necessity in the early days of your career, whether that's a new career that you're starting, to just like learning a language, it's very difficult to learn a language unless you're surrounded by it 24/7. You can hear the voices, hear the conversations in real life, and you're picking up on things in the office. And although I'm all about remote work and being a remote work advocate, I do think in the early days, you get something from that immersion of being around different departments, being around different seniorities, hearing how they speak to each other, how they interact, it makes a massive difference. And not because you I just don't think you can get that working remotely in your early stages of your career and you're soaking that in. So I wish I felt differently about that, especially with my business, it's the anti-brand. But I do think it's important if you want to get into that position and for emotional intelligence and for EQ as well, actually picking up on those things of like the nuances of like listening and being curious and hearing about the different terms. When I was in tech recruitment, I didn't have a clue about tech, and I would hear the developers talking, and I would just be bothering them like, "You said this word, like what is iOS? What is Swift?" Being around people and picking up on conversations that you wouldn't necessarily get on Slack, on Teams, because 'cause they're happening organically around. I do think that is important. If you're curious, like I'm super nosy, like I go over the curious and into nosy. So I'm constantly over like hearing and earwigging into people's conversations. And I never set out to be a leader. That was never something that was in my remit that I was really bothered about. So but I think I've got to this place now because of the nosiness and because picking up on people's nuances and being in that environment. I don't know if I would have that if I was remote from day one, actually.
I really appreciate the fact that you said what you said about that it does take some in-person work, was super important if you want to develop into a leader, because I think it makes everything else you talk about more credible because it is kind of anti-brand a little bit. And, I think it's really, but only to a degree. And I think it's important for individuals and people, especially newer in their career, to understand that and not go in with blinders thinking, hey, all I'm going to do is work remote, because you can miss out. You can miss out on the nuances or just learning through osmosis, having people around. The opportunity to go get coffee with somebody and work with them is super important. So,
Yeah.
Michelle, I appreciate you for bringing that up. Kind of going back to the networking piece a little bit, you recently in May, a couple months ago, had your first remote career event. How did that go?
Oh, it was actually a few weeks ago. It's like a month ago to the day, actually, which is quite cool. I have been thinking about this for years and I had been planning it for about 5 months. I never done events before, never planned anything like this online before. I've done a couple of webinars, but it was not to this level of this event. And the reason for the event, I wanted to create something for that was going to be as valuable for remote first companies who want to hire great talent as remote talent that is truly remote ready. They understand what it means to be remote. We even had a question in the form, so we didn't let just anybody in. What does remote work mean to you? What does it mean to be successful in remote work? And there's like a little trick question there of you have to be online all the time and respond to messages all the time. You have to do a few little trick questions in there to show if people understood what remote means. So my vision for this job fair was to bring together those companies and the job seekers for human connection. I feel like the human element has been taken out of hiring. People, and like you said before, companies are inundated. They don't know any other way. They have automation set up because they want to be more efficient. And equally, the job seekers are blanket applying because they're just getting blanket rejections. So you can see why they both end up like this. And what I found was people that I just want to speak to someone, I just want to have a conversation with someone and I can show them how good I am with XYZ. And I definitely noticed that with the majority of my clients that I was working with. On paper, they might not have looked that great, but I've hired half of the people, half of the people in my team were actually were clients to start with because I knew how great they were. But had I not had that conversation with them, I wouldn't have realized that because what they showed on paper was different. So I was like, I need an event where people can have conversations with each other. And I would like to do it in person, but I want to test out how to do it online first. So I wanted a place that was mimicking a mixture between a conference environment and a job fair, but a much better one that wasn't just here's my CV, here's my resume, let's put it in the bin and let's move on and get a free pen from the stand. I wanted something much more interactive. And I did it. I honestly, not just me, I had an amazing team behind. I have an amazing team, but the amazing team behind me. The feedback was amazing. It's been less than a month and already 3 people have been hired in positions, many more are interviewing. And the feedback I was getting from people like, "Thank you." I felt like I was seen. I felt like I was heard. I felt from the companies, I felt like I got to speak to great people that I might not have done before. and consider different people. So yeah, it honestly, I cried when like on the second day after it ended. I just sat there bawling, and I'm like, like it was a mix of like tiredness and exhaustion of just like, we did it, like this worked, and yeah, I was over the moon.
No, that's awesome, and, you know, it feels great when you feel like you made a difference in somebody's life, and when you kinda stick your neck out there and you try something a little different. So I assume you have another one of those coming up on the forefront, or at least planning-wise.
We'll see. I have a habit of trying to put too many projects on at once. So I promised my team we wouldn't talk about another event until
Okay.
July. So I'm having a bit of a break.
Alright.
So I'm sticking to that promise.
How else does a remote rebellion help, let's say, organizations maybe that wanna spin up their first ever remote team?
I haven't worked with an organization who's doing this for the first time, actually. So that'd be quite interesting because I don't pretend to be an expert on how to work remotely the best. Like, that's not my expertise. And I always differentiated, I always made a point to be like, I'm the talent attraction, I'm the bring people in. I'm not necessarily the HR retaining and the policies. That's never been my jam. I've always been more on the like, I know how to match good people and to attract
I'm
good
with you on
people.
that. Yeah. I don't know. I've never been the HR compliance person, you know?
No,
It's more
I'm
about
not PC
how do
enough.
you find right, how do you find I'm always been and I think like you too, it's like, how do you find great people with diverse perspectives, put them together and target them towards their strengths?
Yeah, and I love that as well, and I think it's about listening and asking the right questions of what somebody is looking for, but also listening to the things that they don't say. Like, if it like you say, "Oh, yeah, so we need someone young," and I'm like, "Well, first of all, you can't say that. What do you mean by someone young? What is it about a young person you want?" So in your head, you think, "I need someone young," but actually maybe what you need is someone dynamic, someone that understands Gen Z, someone like you can get a 50-year-old who knows how to do all of those things. So, like, getting behind the rather than just ticking the boxes of like, okay, young, must have someone young. You're actually digging into those things. So I've gone off on a tangent of your original question, I believe. What
No,
was your
you're
original?
right. It was just how do you help, how does remote rebellion help organizations spin up their remote staff?
Well, I guess it kind of was on topic. It's about asking the right questions, understanding. Okay, so you're
Being
going remote
curious.
now. Yeah, why? Like nosy, I guess. What is it that you want in your remote team? What is it? What does remote mean to you? Because people just say remote. I'm like, okay, so they can be based anywhere. Well, no, not anywhere. Okay, let's get like to a time zone. Do they need to be based in that time zone or just work that time zone? Do they need to have work rights in the US, the UK, wherever that is? What about holidays? Do you want them as contractors? Do you want them as permanent? So really just and people get annoyed because they get asked all these questions that they don't know the answer to. And they're like, oh, yeah, we really haven't thought about this yet. I'm like, no. Okay. So I go through with companies and really dig into, right, so this is what remote means now for the person. Like, so who are you as a business? Like, what would sell yourself to me as a business? Why would I want to work for you? And companies don't feel like they have to do this. They have this a bit of, especially in this market now, it's an employer's market. They have this arrogance of, well, we're paying them. They should want to work for us. It's a tough market. Like, well, no, like they can go into, if they're good at what they do and you want top talent, they're picky and they can be picky. So sell me on why someone would want to work for you and what kind of people would not be a good match. Like, do you need self-start? Like everyone says self-starter. What does self-starter mean? Like what kind of training are they going to get? Like, so really drilling into what have you got to offer me? And this is when we start building out a job ad. Okay, so because it's an advert, it's an advertisement, and companies list a whole thing of like a laundry list of the requirements and never say what they have to offer. Like, and that's crazy. It's an advertisement. You're advertising something. So sell yourself and do it in a way that is actually honest and not just fluffing up. And tell them the downsides as well. It's going to be tough. We're going to be changing things all the time. One day you'll be doing this, the next day you'll be doing that. That's going to put off some people, and that's okay. So it would be really getting close with the founders, getting close with the senior leadership team and the people on the ground doing the job at the minute of like, tell me what's and all, what are the shit parts of your job? What are the good parts? And what kind of people would fit well in this? And what do you think are the skill sets missing? Whenever I've had people working as my right hand women or men, I've always found people that fill in the gaps of the stuff that I'm not good at and I don't like to do. So the processes, the procedures, the detail. I'm like, I'm all about big picture. I need the details person to keep in check.
No, no, absolutely. You need people to, fill in, focus on your strengths and let them, help cover the weaknesses. And it kind of reminds me of something you said earlier when you talked about, companies who say they're remote first, but it turns out that they're not. Is that because they're being dishonest or they just don't go through this exercise that we're talking about right here? So they think that they're remote first?
The mix. I like to think it's not them being dishonest, but it's been 5 years now, guys. Come on, we've been working remote for over 5 years. Like, if you don't know what it is now and you can't ChatGPT definitions, then yeah, I'm worried for you, basically. So I think there is some dishonesty because it's a bait and switch. They know more applications will come if it's remote, and they have the upper hand and say, well, if they really want to work here, that they'll come into the office 1 day a week. They have this like, well, it's remote 4 days a week, or you only have to come in as and when required. Like, what does as and when required means? That really drives me mad. Oh, important meetings. Is there an important meeting every day? Is there one every month? Give me an idea. What does the cadence look like?
No, and I think it's so important. All of what you brought up is so important. It's setting the expectations up front and vetting out the people who won't be a good fit. Because, for everybody out there who's a leader or a founder, it doesn't do you any good to bring people in with these rose-colored glasses, and then 3 months later, they're completely miserable because they will end up leaving, and then the cost of rehiring is so much more. As we start to wrap up here a little bit, when, you have your academy, which I think is the core of your business, what are the types of individuals who are job seekers that are like the best fit for reaching out to Remote Rebellion?
This has changed over the years, and I must admit, when I first started the business, I wanted to, and still do, but just help everyone. I was like, it's for anyone. It's for graduates. It's for people in their 60s. It's for everybody. And I've since realized that isn't necessarily true. Um, the people that succeed in the Remote Job Academy and the people that see the results in getting the interviews, getting responses and getting the job in a timely manner are the people who have a bit of grit and the people who are essentially determined to make it happen. So you have people that put in bound, and we talked before about the choice. The people who resign to the fact of like, oh, this is not working and it's not happening for me. I'm like, have you done everything possible? Like, I want the people who come to me and say, I will do this with your help or not. It will probably take me twice or 3 times as long on my own, but I'm doing it. It's not a case of if, it's when. So they are the people I want to work with. And I use two extreme examples, not extreme, but 21-year-old graduate, didn't have any real time experience. She actually got the program for free because she entered a competition and had to do all of this work to get into the competition. Like, she really put her effort in. So she ended up getting a remote job because you could just see she's like, I'm doing this. And then another guy was 68 years old and had been told by so many people, or not told, he'd been dismissed without anyone saying it was because of his age. And he felt like that was, even though he'd worked remotely before. And I just knew he was one of these guys who's like, I'm retiring at 72. That's what age I'm retiring. I've got 4 years left in me. I'm fit as a fiddle. I'm getting it. And he did it in, I think, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. So I knew when I had those calls with him, I started realizing over the years what successful people look like. And the people are just like, do you know what? I could go and learn how to fix my car myself, but I'm going to pay a guy to do it because I don't want to get my hands dirty and I don't have time to be figuring this out myself. So the people who are savvy and understand, if they're not an expert in something, pay an expert who is. Yes, they could go and spend months and months and months and do it themselves. How much of that is worth your time? Like, if you'd rather spend your time than your money, great. But the people that succeed are the people, no matter what they've done in the past, the people who are determined to make it happen because they don't see another way.
Yeah, it sounds like people who could pretty much think critically, but also don't struggle from what I like to call a victim mindset, where they just, I think that that's what kind of sets them apart. Where do you see the future of remote work going, or just the future of work?
I'm actually in the Future of Work Alliance. I joined a few months back, and it's such an interesting group of people. You know, people working hybrid, people working remote, and I learned so much from that group of amazing people. Someone called Denise Broder, who set it up, who's in New York. The future of work to me, everyone's talking about AI taking over people's roles, and I see the future of I actually don't know where I see the future of work. I think there's too many things that are changing right now to give you an educated answer on that, or even like, but the future of remote work, I believe it's gonna, depending on how the market is, I think it's gonna stay like this for the next couple of years. It's gonna be like a kind of teetering on this. When the older generation is dying out, people, the C-suite, so we're going to see more and more companies adopting remote work because some people are stuck in their old ways. They're really stuck on like, no, we need to be in person. When that generation is dying out or retiring, we're going to see massive shifts. So, like in the next 10 years, we're going to see, I believe in 20 years' time, people will have to say if it's on site. Hybrid will be the norm. You won't say hybrid anymore. It's just like that's norm. And people will be saying whether it's on site or not for office jobs, of course.
And that, one other thing that will have to change, and it's a whole different conversation, but you take like downtown San Francisco, the financial district, they're gonna have to rezone all of that to make some of that living area as well. Because if it moves in this direction and people aren't coming in for the real estate wise, you're gonna have to adapt and change and grow. Michelle, this has been awesome. And we've covered so many things. I'll just kind of recap some of them. We talked about the traits that make great remote work, and that if you have a job and you're in person and then you're going remote, it's not the same thing. So you got to make sure that you have that you are a self starter and that you're curious. And it really comes down to what you said is knowing what you want to look for, knowing what you want in both as an employer and as a individual job seeker, and how if you're going to be a remote first company, you got to be honest with it and set the expectations up front by what you mean by that, and so much more. What is one other thing that you want to leave the listeners with?
For people to ask themselves the right kinds of questions. And one thing I find really helpful is a lot of people especially when they're job seeking, but in general, people struggle with confidence and struggle with, they see themselves through a different lens than other people see them. One task I had to do with a personal branding expert I was working with, actually, when we had a rebrand of Remote Rebellion, she had a questionnaire that she had me send out to 30, 40 different people, from ex-colleagues, to friends, family members, clients, people who I wanted to become clients but decided not to become clients. She had me send this questionnaire out that was asking a whole bunch of questions like, what 3 words do you think of when you think of Michelle or Remote Rebellion? What do you think are her strengths? What do you think are her weaknesses? And you'd be amazed, like some of these things that were coming up time and time again. I'm like, I didn't think I was organized. I would describe myself as this, but all of these 10 people seem to think I'm organized. I'm like, so could I be wrong? Maybe I'm not disorganized. So I would implore people, maybe not a questionnaire, but if you want to ask 10 people, and if you feel a bit weird just asking for your strengths, you could say, hey, can you tell me 2 of my strengths and 1 area for improvement? And the answers you get will probably blow you away because they won't be the things that you think you're good at and not good at. They'll be maybe wildly different than what you think.
And getting feedback in general is just like fuel for growth anyways, and like you said, being curious, asking questions. And I mean, that there's no better way to grow for growth than to get input like that.
And you see yourself in a different light, and it's a bit of an ego boost, and sometimes people need that. They need that little bit of a boost of like, "Oh, maybe I am good at this, and I didn't think about myself in that light," and that's nice, like, that, and that's gonna, like, make you stand a bit taller and, like, come across in a different way, so I really think it helps.
It really does, especially in these days with so much uncertainty and whatever else is going on in the world, that sometimes we need a little pat on the back for ourselves. One of the things that a couple people talked about on the show is just keeping a success journal where when they do things right, they write it down. And if they have a bad day, if they get rejected for a job, or they go through a breakup, they can go back and they could look and see some of the successes they've had. So, asking other people, looking at what you've done in the past. And for you leaders out there, and what I mean by leaders, you could be a parent, coach, you could be a sibling. I think one of our responsibilities is to help people understand the greatness that they have inside of them anyways, and just, show some recognition and say, if somebody's feeling down, at least be empathetic and share with them, hey, look what you've already accomplished or what you've done. I think that just helps everybody.
Yeah, agreed. I like it. A success journal. I'm going to use that.
Success journal. There you go. Where can our audience connect with you at?
So pretty much everywhere, Remote Rebellion. So remoterebellion.com, on LinkedIn. I'm under as Michelle Coulson, Remote Rebellion, and same on Instagram. They're the main free platforms.
And you got about 80,000 subscribers on or followers on LinkedIn as well.
Apparently I'm a big deal. Yeah.
You're a big deal. You're a big deal. Well, listeners, do me a favor. If you know somebody who, and I'm sure you do, who's considering remote work, or maybe they are already doing remote work, but it's not going well, send them this episode. There's definitely some great learning lessons for them out there, and they'll get a lot of value out of it. And until next time, everybody, stay curious, keep learning. Have a great day. Thank you, Michelle. You're awesome.
Ain't got time to wait for stuff to go great to feel great. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think we have time to wait for anything. It's important to take action, isn't it? Because if you sit back and wait, you're going to have a tough time, I think.